Hi, it's James Harrison. We're going to do another series of talking and whatever you want to call it. This one is called Drummer Hot Topic. And the first one for the Drummer's Hot Topic subject is virgin bass drums versus drilled bass drums. Now, what I mean by that, a virgin bass drum, pardon the term, is a bass drum that does not have any mounting hardware for the drums on it. A drilled bass drum has a tom mount or something coming out of it. Now, my take on this might be different than a lot of people, but there's been a trend lately to go more to the virgin bass drums. And we'll get into that in a second. When I first started playing, this is actually like the first kit. You really can't see it. This is a little tiny 20-inch bass drum, and it had a little mount on it. And when I was younger, that was fine. I was very limited on height. I could do angles toward me, and I could do this way, kind of like the old L-Rod type things. But up and down height, it was very limited, and I think that you started seeing more and more. This would have been, the late '60s, early '70s. You started to see in the '70s more and more changes come about to where you could get a tom arm. I remember Slingerland, I think it was called the Swivel-matic, and the Rogers was the Swivel-matic. I think maybe Slingerland was the Set-O-matic or something like that. But I have a Buddy Rich kit, and it's a single post with a long arm, and it's a 24, 13, 16, 16 with a matching snare. With that, you could get the 13 off to the side quite a bit because it was a 24-inch bass drum. And then at the same time, you could go up and down with it. And you started seeing more and more of that kind of thing. You have to remember John Bonham had a 26-inch kick drum with a 15-inch tom. So as the drums started getting bigger, you started seeing people coming up with ways to mount it. And it's pretty common nowadays to see that people have a single tom on a snare drum stand, and then they have their floor toms. So I grew up in the era where I actually liked the mount on the bass drum because it freed me up to put my cymbals wherever I needed to. Now you have to remember when I grew up, they didn't have boom stands. Everything was straight. So over time, the industry has grown to have cymbal boom stands, and in the '90s everything became huge with counterweights and everything, and then you started getting into rack systems and all kinds of alternatives on the ways to mount the drums. And I don't know if it was DW that started it, because I do have a kit here that is a virgin bass drum, and I don't personally, I couldn't tell you whether it affects the sound or not because I use muffling in the bass drum anyway. I think 99% of the people use some kind of muffling in the bass drum. So, however, I do understand why some people want that virgin bass drum. Some people want to get the tom at a certain height or angle, and an mount doesn't allow them. But if they come off of a cymbal stand with a mount, they can get it into position, maybe a little bit more centered or whatever, and that tom mount coming out of the bass drum might have been in the way. So if they don't have that, they don't have to worry about it. I will say, however, if you're going to mount off cymbal stands, you're going to get a little bounce off of a tom. I don't care what you do. By the time it's hanging off of an extra mount and you're hitting it, and most of them nowadays, they're in some kind of an isolation mounting system. But there's a little bit of a dance to it. It moves. So if you have one coming off a stand here and one coming off a stand here, it is a little bit more complicated to get them to be perfectly even. And then when you play, let's say you're on a riser or a stage, sometimes that starts to move, and they might bump each other, or you'll see them moving where they don't move the same way when they're mounted to a center post on the bass drum. Does it affect the sound that much? I don't know, again, because so many of the drums now, even at the entry level, I guess I should say not the bottom of the line entry level, but most of the student to intermediate sets up have some kind of a mounting system now that allows the drum to resonate more. And that we'll save that topic for another discussion. But so having both, because I grew up in an era where the mounting was very limited, to where the mounting had a ton of possibilities. And I've also had racks, two different rack systems before that I tried. and they I was able to make everything work, and I'm still able to make everything work. This particular kit right now, I've got a different one I'm setting up over here, a Yamaha over here, but this is an old Premier. I can't use the original mount and get the drum up where I want it, so it comes off of a stand when I use it. And it's got a what we used to call the rims mounting system on it because it has an old thing, and I don't want to drill the shells. Where the Yamaha kit has a what they call the yes mounts, excuse me, and that brings up other topics that we'll get to as well anyway. But most companies have come up with some kind of a thing to make the drum as resonant as possible. But most people still, even when they get that way, and they buy, the most resonant possible hardware, kit, mounting systems, virgin bass drums and everything, and then they muffle and put gels and stuff on everything to take away that. So it's kind of an oxymoron that happens that way, but it does. So me personally, having grown up through all that, I actually prefer a mount on the bass drum because the way I set up, it does give me a working possibility with everything. But for people who maybe, let's say they have just a standard 4-piece kit, but they want to be a little bit more ergonomic and have the first tom a little bit higher and in a different position than the second tom and have it fall to the floor tom, that's where the virgin bass drums come in really handy because you're not limited to the trying to put 2 toms on one stand and whatever their limitations may be. But I've also found that with most of the modern mounting hardware, you can turn one arm upside down and do all kinds of things and still make it work. To me, I feel like the center post on a bass drum mount is more solid and it doesn't affect the sound for me. But I do understand a lot of people, they buy modern drums that have no mounts drilled into the shells. Why not do it for the bass drum? And so that's another thing. So just be prepared if you're looking, especially if you're buying something online and you're seeing a kit. Don't be afraid to ask a salesperson or send a typed question or whatnot, or just read between the lines or read the fine print and make sure that if you're buying a kit that has a virgin bass drum, that it for the toms, if it comes with any kind of mounts that go on cymbal stands, a lot of times they don't. And you'll get that in, you'll go, oh, I bought the shell pack, but then you realize it doesn't have any mounting system for those toms. Where a 5-piece shell pack with the mount coming out of the bass drum, usually that's included. So there's a lot of things to consider. If you're a sound purist, you will find possibly differences, but if you're going to put tape and pillows and whatever to get the sound that you want, and there's nothing wrong with that. You should get the sound that you need for whatever your recording situation is. You should do what you need to do and get whatever you want. But it's a new debate. But I think the big question is for a lot of people, especially younger people, if you're buying something that has a virgin bass drum, no mounting of any kind, realize that when you buy a shell pack, it's usually not going to have any mounts whatsoever to put them on cymbal stands. They're attached to the drums in some way, but not a mounting hardware to put on the cymbal stands. So that's something to consider too. I think both are unique. I feel like a center post on a drum is more solid for me and for the way that I play and the setup that I use. Let's hear what you think.